one of our athletes actually told me one day, because we practiced rolling so much, she was playing field hockey and she got tripped. And instead of like, she was about to fall on her face, and then she realized like she tucked her head and shoulder and rolled out of it and got back up and continued to sprint. So she went from like running, tripping, rolling, back to sprinting seamlessly.
That was Jeremy Frisch, and you're listening to the Just Fly Performance Podcast. Today's podcast is sponsored by Gym Studio. Gym Studio is a frictionless gym and studio management software. It can effortlessly manage memberships, schedule classes, track attendance, and even automate billing. To check out what Gym Studio can do for you, head to gymstudio.com and set up your free 14-day trial in less than 5 minutes. Welcome to another episode of the podcast, and thanks for tuning in. It's great to have Jeremy Frisch back on the podcast. Jeremy is a field leader in long-term athletic development and youth athletic performance. He's been a strength and performance coach on many levels of the athletic performance continuum. He's coached a number of sports on the youth level, and on today's show, he speaks on key principles in developing not only speed, but multilateral athleticism in youth, all the way up to more developed athletes. This was an awesome show. It was great having Jeremy back on. Let's get to the episode. Jeremy, great to have you back on the show. Excited for our conversation. It's definitely been too long since our last one. So thanks for being here.
Appreciate you having me. I'm excited. Always excited to be on this podcast. So much to talk about.
Yeah, I know. Just even talking before I pushed record, man, I'm like, I could have probably talked to you for another 2 hours. So I did want to start this off, though. So a game that was in your course that I instantly went out and played it with my own kids in the front yard was, and everyone knows it just because it's American Gladiators, but that Powerball game. So where you just have like a few buckets, and you guard the buckets. And we played it on a hill because I don't have a flat yard, but I was like, just the amount of like laughter from my kids, the intensity in sprinting was just crazy. And I was like, this game is the best. But tell me a little bit about that game in the sense of, is that something you pulled from like a physical education curriculum? Did you just watch the American Gladiators show and be like, hey, we should do this? Tell me a little bit about the origin of that game, and then tell me a little bit about how you use it with the different ages for speed and agility and just gameplay.
Yeah, so that obviously I'm an 80s kid, so I grew up watching American Gladiators every Saturday morning, like so many other kids. And that obviously was being a football guy. I love football as my favorite sport. That was definitely like my favorite one to watch because there was just so much, you got to try to score in the bucket and you could get tackled. And, obviously there's a huge agility component where you're trying to juke a guy or get away or get separation. And obviously on the defensive side, and these are not things I was thinking about then. And I was just excited to watch. But as I got older and became a coach, we're always thinking of games and things we can use to improve performance. And it was like that type of activity was one that I think would be hugely beneficial for our athletes, right? And so we really started way back. I want to say we probably created that game the way we do it now. Probably 2006, 2007. I think I posted a video of it similar in T-Nation. Way back when I was writing for those guys.
I didn't know you did that. I'll have to go back to this.
Yeah, I got a bunch of articles on T-Nation, and I'm pretty sure that's where we first did it. A guy named David Jack, who works for, I believe he's with Reebok and Men's Health now, and my friend Shane Davenport, who is the head strength and conditioning coach for football at Holy Cross, and another guy, this guy Sean Smith, who is the head of Exceed Sports Performance over in Westboro, a few towns over from here. Good friends of mine. We all used to work together, and we were like just messing around on the field one day, and that's kind of what we came up with. Was that Powerball game. I've used it ever since then with every age, pretty much. From college age athletes all the way up into, all the way down to, probably second or third grade kids who you can understand, who are just old enough to understand the concept of the game. You know what I mean? But the way we play it, obviously, there's no contact, there's no tackling. We play with a kind of a one-hand touch where you have to try to score a ball into a bucket and not get touched on your way there. One of the things I like too is like every kid gets 3 balls to score, right? So you have your kind of your safe place where your balls are located, and you can you can only grab one ball at a time, and then you got to try to go and score into their, the scoring zone, and you only have 30 seconds to score all three of the three of the balls. You know what I mean? So it's like you're moving. You have to if you want to score, you want to win the game. You have to use some speed and kind of move as quickly as you can. So the interesting part of the game is that for every amount of like defensive players, so say you're playing 3-on-3, if it's 3-on-3, you have to have 4 buckets to score. If it's 4-on-4, you have to have 5 buckets to score. So you always have one extra bucket. That forces the defense to play some type of like zone defense, right? You can't just play 1-on-1. You can't just cover a guy because someone will always be open. You know what I mean? Like there'll always be a bucket open. So that was really, it was a little bit of like, we kind of played with it a little bit, and that's kind of what we came up with. And I just really love that like strategy, because you see kids kind of waiting. Like you might say you're playing 4-on-4, you see like 2 or 3 of the kids try to go score, then you got a couple kids kind of waiting back, and they're waiting for their opportunity to attack and see an open space. So I love that like strategy type thing. I love like going from one side of the field to the other and trying to score on the far bucket. And there's a lot of crisscrossing, and it's just a lot of chaos. You know what I mean? So I think there's a lot of benefits, not only on the offensive side, but on the defensive side in that game. And so I think it checks a lot of boxes when it comes to, athletic development, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. When you were talking about the creation of that game, part of me thinks about like that there was that scene in The Social Network where Mark Zuckerberg's character is like writing on the window because he had come up with like the idea for the Facebook or whatever, and it's like this big dramatic thing. I can imagine like you coming up with the Powerball, like synthesizing all these things, because it's such a simple. And I look at it kind of like this, and maybe this can lead into what we were going to talk about. I had some thoughts on kids speed training and kids on motorized treadmills, and it's almost like it's an inverted U. Like there's on one end of things you have the full chaos of the game, which especially younger kids, it's almost too much for them to fully apply their speed, their decision making. I mean, just with kids 5 and 6 year olds, I know in soccer practice when you just play tag or freeze tag, you get way more sprinting and way more explosiveness, because it's just easier. It's way simpler, and they can easily understand it, and then they can easily display all those things. And it's for them conditioning, if you want to call it that. I wouldn't call it that, but they're getting that more too, because just the decision-making reins are taken off. So you have like sport, and then you have these versions of sport where it's just simpler. And then you could keep going till it's just the simplest thing, which is sticking a kid on the motorized treadmill. But I wonder if people, that's just the thing, right? There's always a balance to this. Is it's per your age, there's going to be that point where it's perfect. There's enough degrees of freedom that's still fun and meaningful, and there's self-directed tasks and autonomy. And then it gets this point of excessiveness, or even like having like 6-year-olds run over wickets, and you're teaching them sprint form and that kind of thing, And so that's where I'd be curious, I like that you do label your work with children as it is speed training, but the way what it actually is a little bit different than just, hey, we're just going to make you faster at the 40 or improve your, this is air quotes, form. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that in terms of, and maybe we can center this around, okay, like a lot of people will see like a 10-year-old like doing like high tech or adult speed training and think that's a good thing. Or even younger a lot of times. What do you think kids need? Like, tell me your thoughts on that. What do kids really need? And when are they ready for something that's more formalized? Like, when do you start timing the sprints and making that more significant part of it?
So I think the current like school of thought is like, oh, we got to like teach kids the technique of like, say, like stopping and starting, right? Like, so change of direction. And then after you teach them that technique, you put them in a more chaotic environment after they teach it in a more like sort of strict, like, cone drill or whatever. But that's just not how children learn.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Like they don't learn in that environment. And they can't really sit there and listen to you and pay attention and say, put your foot here and do that there. The way they learn is that you put them in an environment and then they problem solve and they start to figure out how to stop and start. You know what I mean? And so what really should happen is that you immerse them in as many games and as many type of activities as possible. All right. And they come up with tons of different strategies to get through that activity. And the more activities you do, the more strategies they come up with and the more problem solving ability they come up with. Right. And then as they get older and they get a little bit more mature and they can listen and understand more, then you start to refine their movement depending on whatever sport they're playing, right? Like you can say, all right, like you can start to break them down and look at, like, say they're 13 or 14 and say, all right, well, now, we're going to start to break down these drills a little bit more and make you even better at them, right? Like they do, like I say, in an NFL combine, right? Like they're breaking things down and getting really trying to make them these, like, do I agree? Like, do I think like that will again carry over to a more chaotic environment? I don't know. I don't think so. But if coaches want to do that, I actually don't have a problem with it as they get a little bit older. I still just think, because here's the thing, like, especially too, even when they hit their early teens, they're growing so much.
Yeah.
They're like just one big compensation. So everything changes all the time anyways.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's my idea, and just keep them immersed in those activities, and get them stronger and put them through, ranges of motion so they improve their mobility, things like that. And yeah, you can do regular like speed training and wickets and any of that stuff you want to do, but do it when they understand why they're doing it.
Yeah.
Right. When a kid's not as 7, 8, 9, they don't understand that. They know movement, and the more movement you can give them, the more things they come out. I can't tell you how many times, and especially in that game that we've played, that Powerball game, where a kid came up with a move that I've never seen them do, and they came out of nowhere. Came up out of nowhere. Like they didn't practice that. It was not pre-planned. They just came and it just like happened, right? And that only happens when you immerse them in those type of activities, So that's why I think it's what I always say, like, expand their movement bandwidth. And the only way you can expand their movement bandwidth is by like immersing them in as much movement as possible and as many ways as possible. And that's what childhood's all about. And it's the same thing in school. Like you're trying to get them, a general understanding of math, general understanding of English, history. Like you're just trying to build their knowledge base of things. So then later on they can specialize into, things that they interest them, So whether it's Powerball, whether it's just a regular game of tag, all I'm looking for is to give as much, like, I guess, nutrient dense movement, right, as you can, for them to kind of take it in and learn how to come up with strategies and problem solve.
Yeah.
And like, here's the thing. That's what kids did before the invention of strength and conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
That's all kids did, is just play.
Mm-hmm.
There was no, outside of maybe like kids get into martial arts, or gymnastics, right? Those are the things that have been around a long, long time, way before strength and conditioning. Before that, that's how kids developed. They played games and they played sports, and, they went outside with their buddies and came up with different ideas and things like that. So it's like we were talking about earlier about the 80s movies. Like I would see a movie and go outside and come up with some training thing just on my own, just to emulate what I saw in on a movie. So that's how kids naturally developed for forever.
Yeah.
And so when I look at strength and conditioning today and I see kids doing, mini versions of adult training or elite athlete training, that's not going to lead to them being an elite athlete. It's the opposite. Get back to the things that they naturally have done growing up, and then hopefully, if they get the right opportunity and they love the sport and they have that intrinsic motivation, then they'll put that time into during those, early teen years. They'll start to really focus on becoming an elite athlete, because that's where it happens right there. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, I think there's a lot to be dug out of the 80s. Like even it's interesting to look how a lot of things in life, are very like connect in the sense of there was a lot more creativity, like in the 80s, the 90s, with like music, with film. Like people had constraints; they were forced to use shadows a lot better. And it's been said, like, people don't have Like you wouldn't find a crew that had the skills that a crew in the 80s or 90s did with how to do the lighting in the movie set, because the constraints forced you to come up with creative solutions, or that happened. Mark McLaughlin has shared with me, like, I think Led Zeppelin back in the day was forced to do a new way to make their sound because of the constraints, the acoustic constraints of where they were recording, where you wouldn't get there today. And I think that's part of the reason that there's just so much more creativity through those decades. And it's interesting to see how that happens in movement as well. And so I love what you said about the Powerball and you're seeing the kid come up with their own movement solution, because that's the brilliant point of it all. And it's almost like, I think the thing to look at is, well, how do you explain the person who thinks it's a good idea to put an 8-year-old on a speed treadmill? Because I'm sure their thinking is, well, they're getting faster now, so that's going to help them later, is probably the rationalization. They're learning technique. And this is air quotes, because I'm sure that technique, like you said, their body's changing. And that's the thing I think a lot of people don't understand is kids, adults, we problem solve speed based on the constraints of our body, our skeletal structure, our muscle outputs, like all those things is going to impact what your technique actually looks like. And I think that's something a lot of people don't understand. But if you had to say in a nutshell, why is it not a good idea to put an 8, 9, 10, maybe 11, whatever year old on, just to have them do more advanced? They're going to the speed coach. Their big focus is linear sprints and the clock and whatever techniques associated with that. Why is that? If you were to tell someone why is that not a good idea, what would your argument be?
Yeah, because you're not building speed right now as a child. You're building the foundations of speed, right? You're trying to build that. When you look at someone who runs really fast, what are you looking at? You're looking at good posture. You're looking at like good rhythm. Mm-hmm. You're looking at their ability to like be springy, right down the track. Kind of synchronization, right, of their arms and legs and things like that, right? So you're building the foundations of those things. You're not actually getting, like, you shouldn't be worried about getting faster. You don't need to, obviously you're going to do the thing. Like, you want kids to sprint, just to sprint, because it's an amazing activity, right? If you're using everything at once, and it's probably like, brain activity, I don't know, but brain activity is probably, cranked up high. But children don't really understand, like, if you put them on a treadmill and go say, run as hard as you can or try to keep up with this thing, they don't really understand that, like, or do this drill. Like, if there's no kind of rabbit at the end that you're chasing, they don't really get it. No. You know what I mean? So they're never going to put forth the effort. But if you like say, hey, I want you to chase your buddy 20 yards, we're going to play tag. Like, every kid goes all out. They put everything they can into it, right? So there's a difference there between chasing your buddy down the street and running on a treadmill, right? One's just going to make them tired. The other one is, the other one's fun and exciting and makes them work really hard and makes them give a full effort. I told you this story before, but I'll tell it again because it's really like, I worked years ago for like Frappier acceleration, like the high speed treadmill, right? So they had this like elaborate, like, when you first come in for your first session, you put them through like all these like, assessment, right?
Yeah.
It was like, Joel, it was like 3 pages long for like a 9-year-old, right?
Yeah.
Seriously. It was like all this stuff for a 9-year-old. And I was a young coach, so I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, all right, I wasn't going to like, it was my first job too. So I wasn't going to like, go against the grain and tell these guys like, oh, you're doing it wrong. So like one of the tests or one of the assessments was like, a kid had to run a 300-yard shuttle.
Oh man, right? At 9 years old.
At 9 years old, right? And so look at, if you work out just a little bit, you come into our facility for a little bit, you run and 6 weeks later, you're probably going to run a faster 300, right? Because you are just moving more than you have previously, right? Fine. So, wow, you improved your 300. You're like amazing athlete, right? First of all, most kids can't run, like, are not even equipped cardiovascularly to run that distance.
That's a long way for a young kid.
It's a long way.
Yeah.
Long way, especially like when you run 25 yards and back. So there's like an acceleration, a deceleration, and a reacceleration a bunch of times, which just gasses you, right? There's a huge difference between running up and back 6 times and running 300 yards just straight, right? So the kid runs, I'm with the dad, and we're talking. Kid runs the 300-yard shuttle. looks at me, turns white as a ghost, throws up all over the turf, right? Because he's just not equipped to run that distance. Typically, children, when they want to run, they run as fast as they can for a while, and then they get tired and they stop. Like you watch a kid on a playground, right? All right, so there's nothing there for that kid. There's no like carrot at the end. There's nothing to chase. Like he's just like, why am I doing this? Why am I running 300 yards so you could just time me? Right? And so the kid wasn't prepared for it. He obviously does cardiovascularly not equipped. Kid throws up everywhere. Fast forward a couple of years later, we're playing pickle, where it's just like, kids run between two coaches throwing the ball back and forth, right? My son, I think he's 7 or 8 at the time. I told my assistant, Tim, I'm like, Tim, I just want you to sit here and count how many times Brent runs up and back at full speed, right? And just like see how many yards he actually runs. And like one game, he ran like, I don't know, it was something stupid. He was this 7 or 8 year old. He ran like something crazy, like 500, 600 yards in one game, laughing the whole time.
Yeah, exactly.
Sprinting, he'd sprint the length of the floor, dive, roll, get back up, and go the other way. I'm like, let's purposely not hit him just to see how far he can actually run, right? So he literally ran like, I don't know, 500, 600 yards, but it's a game, and he knows that someone's trying to hit him with a ball, and so he's giving it his effort, and there's no throwing up there. Like, there's no getting sick. There's no like, oh, why am I doing this? It's just fun. You know what I mean? It's so there's the difference between like, that's how you work with a child, a young athlete compared to an adult, right? You got a bunch of college guys. They understand that their coach is going to make them run the 300-yard shuttle. Yep, we're going to do that. We're going to make sure that you can get through that drill when you have to go to college football practice. But little kid, they have no concept of that. And then so it's the same thing with the treadmill. Like, oh, they don't understand. Like, oh, I'm going to run on this treadmill, and it's going to make me faster. I'm going to be this great athlete. Like, they can't put those pieces together. But put them in an environment where they're chasing their buddies around, you're going to see a whole lot of athletic things happen.
Oh yeah, we were. That reminds me of. I was just playing a game with my kids. They're 6 and 8 the other day, and they got soccer season coming up. But it's been a little cold, so they haven't been running around outside as much. I still try to make them go out, even when it's cold. Like, still trying to make them go out as much as possible. But we were playing a game where I was just chasing them around a loop, like it's like kitchen, dining room, playroom, and then through the hallway. And I don't know, I mean, this loop's probably, I don't know, like 20 yards if you measured it. Probably not even that, 15, 20 yards. But I don't know how many times I chased him around this loop. Like, I was chasing for probably like 10 minutes. And then I just remember my son being like, like he was breathing,
right?
He was like breathing real heavy. But I mean, he probably ran, like if that was some sort of test where I timed him, he would have cashed out probably about 5 to 8 minutes earlier. But because it was, as we were playing and I was chasing them, they just loved it, and they work so much harder. And I constantly am thinking, there's a really good book I'm reading called Unconstrained. It's by Kevin Sikors. He's like a martial arts teacher, but he right early in the book, it talks about the performer environment relationship. Like, and that's the thing I just think we don't consider is how does the environment and how you perceive the environment change? Like, and that's where I think we think of the body as just this like little simple thing with just like a car. Like you put it in this gear and it's this lever and you turn the wheel this way, but the human body is so much more complex because the environment changes us. I think it even changes our technique. Like if you chase, like if you chase your buddy, you're going to sprint with a different technique than if you don't have anything to chase after, especially if you're a little kid and you haven't done this before. It's just going to be awkward. It's like, okay, I'm just going to sprint for the best time, and like versus chasing your buddy, it's totally different, or chasing a ball or whatever.
I think too, like, I remember someone posting like stuff about like those diagrams, like what the different sprint form with like a football player compared to a sprinter. Mm-hmm. And like, I think, well, maybe that's how they're supposed to look when they have pads on.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Exactly.
And maybe, maybe they're sort of in this like, kind of active, alerted posture because they're probably someone's going to take their head off.
Yeah.
At some, you know what I mean? You're definitely going to get hit. So you're always prepared. Mm-hmm. Like, even though you're sprinting, like, there's people around that can probably going to hit you soon. So like maybe your posture is a little bit more alerted because you're prepared to take that hit. Whereas like you're Usain Bolt, you're just running, you're just running. It's so carefree. There's nothing you have to worry about.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's like, maybe those things affect how your sprint form is. And maybe we shouldn't even care what your sprint form looks like because of all of those factors that we have no control over. You know what I mean? So I don't know. That's just things that go through my head like that.
Yeah, there was a good video of Ronaldo, the soccer player, and then some Spanish sprinter, and they did like here's the Ronaldo's his time, here's his form, and when Ronaldo ran, I mean, this is a guy who, I mean, one of the most athletic guys on the soccer field, and when he ran that 30 though, without chasing anybody, no ball, no games, no environmental stimuli, he had his chin like way up and out, like it didn't look very good, honestly. Like, I think if he had his chin down, if he had his eyes focused on something, and I'm sure if you videoed him sprinting all out, chasing somebody in the game, he would actually look a lot different than that. His posture would have been locked on to something in his environment. So I just find stuff like that really interesting, because I think that if you were trying to sell a technical speed program and say, oh, wow, even Ronaldo isn't running well. Look how bad his form is right now. And you need to run like this. But then all of a sudden, oh, wow. Well, in the game, he actually runs different because now he has an environment to lock. Even for adults, I think there's those pieces. And I'm not saying that there aren't times when you're more mature, there aren't things to technically work on. But I just think we first need to look at that environment performer relationship, and then that layer of perception. How do you perceive what's going on? Because that motivation is just, it's everything. If you don't have that, that's where stuff gets so boring and robotic. And then I think too, I would say, I was going to ask you, well, what's the drawbacks of putting that 9-year-old on the treadmill? And I would imagine it just doesn't really do much, but it's just the pressure is probably the negative, like the parent expectations, the lack of joy in doing that thing if you're that young. Unless you just freaking love it. Maybe one out of 100 kids who just love it.
Right. It's like the parent that hits me up, or like the coach is like, "You're full of crap." Like my kids love Olympic lifting. They're 6 and 7. They're, it's like you're an outlier.
Mhm.
Like, because maybe like my kids all like come to the weight room because like they don't know anything else.
Mhm.
But I know for a fact that most kids, that they're not like that. You know what I mean? Like my oldest is a total gym meathead, right? But he grew up in a gym, so I understand like some of his friends probably have no concept of like how he thinks, right? It's the same, like it's like most kids. There's a few kids that are outliers that are, probably would like a treadmill or like lifting weights, but most kids, like if you present them in an activity that's fun and engaging and wide open, they're gonna eventually lean towards that. You know what I mean? And that's been the biggest like shift for me over the last 10, 15 years, is like this highly structured work and like training environment for younger children just didn't work. They didn't like it. At first maybe they did, but then once the novelty wore off, they didn't, and they were gone, and they didn't come back to my facility.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so then I realized like, oh, I need to make this more fun and come up with ideas and ways to train. And that's where I really just started diving into the books and childhood development and all that stuff. And you realize like, all right, and you realize like, what's the stuff you did when you were a kid that made you happy?
Yeah.
There's your answer. And then I realized, okay, well, we're going to do all those things. And then as the kids start to transition or get older, you can start to transition to more structured activities.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And then that's literally how it worked for me. And then you start reading like long-term athletic development, and it's not a perfect science, but then that's what Bali was getting at when he wrote those kind of like levels of long-term athletic development. It's really like fundamentals and just really open and games and activities, and then it gets more structured as you go on. And I mean, that's how life happens too. You know what I mean? And if you look in like the Russian, like everyone thinks like the Russians had this like big secret, but if you look at like, those Eastern Bloc training, you see all the videos are black and white. Like those guys are doing gymnastics and wrestling and climbing on things and doing pull-ups and like just all like out in the mountains, running over, like jumping over rocks and stuff. It's like, that's just GPP. That's all, and they had it right. They really, I mean, obviously they had some other stuff that was helping them as well, but every other country was as well. So I think like, yeah, it's if you really want to develop an athlete, it's gotta be age appropriate, and it's gotta, you gotta get them excited for what they're doing. And if you do it long enough, if you do it right, you can keep those athletes for a long time and sort of see them through the stages. So like, I can tell you right now, like my son's class, he's a senior, and the class before him, and maybe the 2 classes before him, those classes were my first like youth athletic development groups when they were like, 7 or 8 years old. And so now they're, seniors, and there's a whole bunch of them that have literally been coming to my gym during that time, and we've done all those things. Like we did the fun stuff. We did the, we did the fun stuff. We did the games, and then we transitioned to like, me teach them how to do a dumbbell snatch or a goblet squat. And, now we got kids squatting 400 or 500 pounds. Like we've literally done that. Like the stuff I say, not just like theory, it's actually happened. You know what I mean? And so, it's awesome. And I sorry, getting back to what we were talking about, like those programs, the youth speed programs are always going to sell like probably way more than my games program, because, the other part of it is like, you actually have to, like, as a parent, you'll have to go out there with the games and go play.
Yeah.
Go play with them and stuff like that. And sometimes people want to just drop their kid off and have someone else take them.
Yeah. I think too I had a couple thoughts. One was, you just said like the novelty. Like I do think there are some kids like who will do like that formal adult style training because they grew up in it and they see their parents do it. But I think there's also, like you said, there's a novelty piece. Like it's funny. My kids are 8, 6, and 13 months, or about 14 months. And the one who's 14 months, like if she's in the basement gym, she'll go over to a kettlebell and kind of try to lift it, because I don't know. It's like somehow she knows. I'm not telling her to do that, but it's like, and my son did the same thing. Like he just knows these are for lifting. And so he just goes over, but their goal is not to like train. It's just to see what this thing is. Mess around and explore and see if they can do it. But then what I think the error is, if the adult sees that interest and it's like, oh, we got to start training. And then you push past that point of novelty. After a few sessions, you move past that point of novelty. And now it's, oh, dad's making me do this. Well, I better do this. Dad likes it when I do this. I mean, again, maybe there's those kids who really do like it. But for me, I mean, I'll do sprints with the free lap, and if my kids are around, I'll say, hey, you want to run through? And they like it. It's fun for them because they don't have to do it every week. Like, and they can quit whenever they want, or they can keep going if they want, or whatever. But it's not something I'm not like, oh yeah, we're going to do this every week. It's more just exploring. And if it's not exploring and fun at that age, and you go past that point of novelty and you move in, it's like the inverted U again, then that becomes a problem. And so I think about, like, I like that I have, I do a lot of hurdling stuff in my own training too. So my friend, I mean, I'm like the crazy guy in the neighborhood because I have hurdles, like they're dog agility hurdles, but they go up to like 33, 36 maybe. So it's like high enough to be like an intermediate hurdle height. And I'll do different rhythms because I like, if I'm doing a workout, I like the rhythm and the hurdling component of athleticism. And sometimes I'll put 2 or 3 out for my kids and they'll try, they love running over them. It's like an obstacle course, but like,
oh, perfect. Yeah.
But like you said, I wouldn't say, hey, you have to have this rhythm, because the ideal rhythm is, you at least have a rhythm. Like maybe you do 3 steps and go. So it's like da-da-da, long, da-da-da, long. But what I would do is I would probably try to space the hurdles to just get that rhythm out of them without, them knowing anything. They just do it and they're having fun or whatever. But the actual timing or strength training is the last thing on my mind for them until they're old enough and ready for it, because it just doesn't make sense. And then hearing too, I think that's important, because I'm like, all right, well, why don't you put the 10-year-old on the speed treadmill? Well, then look at, your kids are strong. They're developed. Now they're strong. I mean, your oldest son ran like a really fast 40 time too. And I'm sure he wasn't doing that stuff when he was 8 years old. It's just,
last summer was the first time we ever did speed work at age 16, was the first time, because up until that point, he's been busy. Like his summers were taken up with like sports.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have a small high school, so he's a 3-sport athlete. So like he would come down and lift and train, but like we never really had a lot of time to get into the field to do actual speed work.
Yeah.
So his speed developed via, getting really strong, jumping, plyometrics, and playing lots of sports.
Yeah.
And then his 40 time came about by, I have a friend that's really good at like combine stuff. He just basically came by one day for like literally 12 minutes and like worked his start.
Yeah.
And then and that was it. And then he went and ran, 2 weeks in a row. He had really good 40s. And I think like one of the days, he's an idiot. He like did like a heavy squat session the day before because he just, and he still ran a fast time the next day. You know what I mean? So I have video, you've seen it, but like my two sons are perfect examples. Like they would be in the gym when they were young, see older kids that they admired lifting. They would jump in. I would teach them that day, like they would do stuff and then maybe not touch a bar for months or even a year. You know what I mean? Like I have a picture of my second son, Grady. He was like 6 or 7. And I have a picture like where I taught him how to like really organize the spine and get into like a nice hinge position. Right. And like we did some jumps with the bar with like a training bar that day. And I think he did like maybe some like funky front squats or whatever. But like he probably didn't touch a bar again for a long, long time. He just happened to want to do it that day because there was a bunch of older kids down there.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much how they developed to learn their technique. Is like they jumped in here and there. And then when the time was right, I think for like, 13, 14, they realized like, oh, this could make me better. And they're mature enough to understand like, you have to do it consistently. And then they did it. And now, the oldest one can clean a lot and squat a lot. And the other one's like younger, but he's different body, but he's pretty strong for his size as well. So it's like, you just let it happen naturally. I got another example, like my youngest son playing baseball. So like he's a pretty decent hitter. Like he hits the ball very well. All my other kids have like taken lessons here and there. He's never taken a lesson. He's by far the best hitter on the team. Right. And the only thing this is what I did when he was younger. We went to a field. He was like 7 years old, brought a bucket of balls. We went to the outfield and I said, all right, like we figured out the distance of where he could hit the ball over the fence. So like hit a home run, but he's in center field. Right. So like, say it's like 25 feet and I'd soft toss him the ball and he'd swing as hard as he could and hit it over the fence. And then once he could hit like 10 over the fence, I'd move it back 5 feet and we do it again. And we've been doing that like that for years. So he's 11 now and he's at home plate. You know what I mean? And he's never done a lesson, anything like that. I've just sat there and throw him soft toss and he swings the bat as hard as possible. Just max intent, hard as he can. And what happened? His body self-organized. He figured out the best technique for him and he hits the ball far. You know what I mean? And he hits it consistently. And so now he's 11 and he's at home plate and he hits the ball over the fence. You know what I mean? And nothing like no fancy bat, no like, no lessons, no playing all year round, no going to the cage when it's in the wintertime. In the winter, he's playing baseball and in the fall, he's playing football. So like, we just let it happen. There was no teeth. I am the least technical batting coach in the world. I'm just like, dude, just swing the bat as hard as you can. And it all kind of came together. So that's another example of just letting it happen. And the other side of it is like, he's very excited to go to the field to hit the ball over the fence.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's an incentive there. Like, oh, he loves how it feels to hit the ball far, and get that bat behind it. So it's like, he's asking like, let's go to the field. I'm not like, hey, we got training today. We got to go to the field and hit 3 buckets of baseballs. And he's like, oh, I want to go play with my friends. It's not, it's the opposite. It's like, hey, can we go hit? Can we go hit? Can we go hit? And some days I'm out of work. I'm like, oh, yeah, come on, let's go. You know what I mean? So that's another sign for a parent, right? Like when they're asking you to go somewhere to do that, that's a good sign because they're excited about what they're doing and just let it happen.
Yeah. Where that foundation is joy. Happen. Yeah. That's what I think that Norwegian system talks about a lot is that joy is the foundation because it's that fuel that will then, help you progress. And there's a quote, I think it was misquoted a lot, but it's like the role of a teacher is not to, the quote goes like the role of a teacher is not to fill a cup, but it's to light a fire. And that's posted a lot of educational places, but that's so true. Like if you start thinking of your job with young athletes or even any athlete, to be honest, like to just help them light a fire, find what motivates them, what they love doing, and then really stoke that. And yes, we want to provide constraints and different, situations and things. But again, I think it's kind of like an inverted U. Like if you're all you have is, oh, I got all these cool little training tools, but there isn't that underlying motivation in the environment that really gets them to believe in themselves and enjoy the process, then you will never get the best results, even on a high level. I don't believe I think that even works into injuries sometimes. I'd wanted to get this guy on the podcast for a while, Jan Ekstrand. He's like a Swedish researcher on all sorts of injuries and things. And this is a little bit different direction, but I think it's worth saying because I think it matters, is they had done research as to injuries, like how many injuries does this club have? How many injuries does this club have? And they go into volumes and all this stuff. And they said that one of the big factors in how many people got hurt was the quality of the leadership, like the staff and the communication, and the players feel valued and all this stuff and motivated. And that had a role in injury rates and things like that. And so I just think that, then to look and bring that down into youth and like joy, and are we having fun? Are we creating a positive environment for these athletes? And then how does that build upwards and forwards? So it's cool to dig into the Norwegian stuff and the joy as the foundation. I just think that's such an important. I mean, it's just crazy. Like I don't want to make this podcast entirely about like youth sports or bad behavior with like coaches or whatever. But like, I mean, it was funny. My wife had told me there's like a second and third grade football, in town here, tackle football, and like one coach, their team lost and was like making the kids do push-ups after the game because they lost and stuff like that. And I'm like, if you want to look at joy as the foundation, that would be that's amplifying the error. That's what not to do, so it's interesting, man. I think, and that's why I like, I do find, because I'm so technically minded, like I love like all the motor learning and all the nuances, but then I have to, on the other hand, like make extra effort to like really foster that environment, that motivation that provides.
Sure. Yeah. And I, like I said, I guess too, I'm from a generation or a time like I played high school football. Like we didn't have performance training centers around, maybe we had our track coach, but my track coach was my high school coach, so he didn't really care about what your running form looked like. He just wanted you like to compete in the events, because he knew like competing in the events and practicing every day for track will obviously help you with football, right? That was really his big underlying thing. And, he's a really old guy, and he would he used to do like, we used to do like this, like silly calisthenics from like 1960s and stuff. You know what I mean? Because he was a PE teacher too. But like, we didn't work on technique. I felt like our technique developed via the environment we were in. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I guess maybe there's obviously a genetic component as well, but I feel like the kids who were immersed in the most stuff, had the best, there was always a kid that could fly, just naturally fly. But even that kid wasn't always like, I always felt like when I played sports, like I was like in the top 3 of fastest, but I wasn't ever the fastest one. Yeah. But I always had better skill than that fast kid. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's like, I feel like it's good to be fast, but there's also that other side to like, how does your skills develop, and what are all the things you did when you were younger, which is kind of will, kind of mold you into what you become later on. So that's why, like, so it's funny too, like you say things like injury prevention. Like I still believe like, kids falling and rolling and wrestling with their buddies and stuff like that is like some of the best like concussion prevention possible. You know what I mean? Like I think I sort of like, I don't know, taking those spills when you're a kid sort of like, I don't know, gives you a little bit more robust nervous system to be able to handle those hard hits and falls, when later on. So I always used to like, when my kids were little, I wrestle with them. I'd always like grab the back of their head, because I always felt them pushing back. I was like, this is how I'm going to build their neck strength, like for them, like when I like play with them. But like, there's clear research out there too, like rough and tumble play is like just great for all kids, from a sensory feedback perspective, and, just to build like, kind of general muscular strength and things like that. There was a boy, it's funny, I worked with a kid years ago when he was probably 4 or 5, and he had I can't remember what, he had something, it was like, it had a term, but anyways, like he had really low muscle tone. And he was like really flimsy and floppy. And his mom was actually nervous about like, had no, like nothing about like going to like be a good athlete. he was actually more nervous about like him getting off the bus and a kid pushing him from behind and him not being able to like stop himself if he fell and things like
Mhm.
that. And so like one of our things was like I would I would get on the wrestling mat and just wrestle with him. You know what I mean? I would just like grab him by his foot and he'd try to pull away or I grab his arm and I would do different things like just kind of like we would just, and she thought it was great because she was just sitting there watching and laughing. And
Mhm.
we would do those type of activities. And the other ones I would do on him is like I made him like learn how to recrawl again.
Mm.
So I put M&Ms on the floor and he would crawl on his belly and try to scoop up an M&M as he went down. And he'd go like 20 yards, like scooching on his belly. And let me tell you, like the first few weeks of him doing that, it was like a disaster. Like he was like flopping and like he'd get tired, like
Mhm.
5 feet, he'd go and have to stop. But eventually he would be zooming across the floor like a baby, being able to move. And you could see the difference. You could see him more coordinated, him stronger, him being able to do other activities, things like that. So yeah, I think there's so much out there that we're missing
Yeah.
that or coaches don't realize that children can do and like a little bit more natural that will lead to better results when they're older. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the M&M on the floor. That's fun. I'm trying to picture that, like some kid like chasing M&M
Yeah,
scroll.
I made my I
Task
made
and
my oldest.
environment performer relationship there.
Yeah, my oldest, he'll tell you too. He's done that. He's done that before too. We used to do all kinds of crawling stuff and just to make it more fun. And he's been in that one. He's done that one before as well.
That's
So
funny.
yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, tell me a little bit more too about with the intention. And so I was just thinking about some of this. I've been going through kind of I have a folder on my desktop for all sorts of games and play-based stuff, and I was going through your courses again, and I like the one that's just so simple that stands out to me is like the cone grab and chase, where like there's just a cone on the ground, and it's just like the easiest thing. Your training facility too, it's not like this huge gigantic place. It's like a long kind of hallway-ish thing almost like.
Yep.
And I imagine that constraint has changed the way that a lot of things get set up. But like a kid will grab a cone, and then as soon as he grabs it, the other kid chases them. And I'll do stuff like that for track, high school track. We'll warm up with a lot of those games just because
Oh yeah.
a lot of these kids didn't come from a sport background a lot of times, or this is the only thing they do. And if this is the only thing you do, I actually find you get warmed up better. You're going to run faster. A lot of these high jumpers, they'll run faster when they're chasing their buddy or they're doing an agility off a cone than if I just say, all right, we're going to do some 20-meter sprints to get some acceleration development. And that's great. I mean, with a college group for sure, and even the high school for sure, we'll do some of that type of stuff. But they're going to run faster when we do like the partner stuff. So we warm up with that and then we get into more of the technical high jump stuff. But I've used a lot of that for that group and I think it's great. But tell me a little bit more about, okay, you got, and I'd be curious how this changes too up through the ages, like below age 10, middle school or 10 to 12 or 13 and then 13 and up. Tell me about some environmental ways that you drive intent for, and let's just say maybe it's a little bit more linear speed if you want to call it that, but how do you drive intention for that? And then how does that intention change as athletes start to get older and more mature and more into that training zone?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, you'd be shocked. Like even the high school kids, when we use a drill like that, really get into it.
Yeah.
But I do it kind of. I probably do. So in the summer times, I get hired a lot by like high school football teams, and I'll show up at their field and do speed and agility training with the football team. I'll do it kind of opposite of what you're doing. We'll do like the technical stuff first. I'll be like, fellas, we're gonna do this drill today. We're gonna do this and this. We're gonna do some of the technical stuff a little bit first, and then we're gonna finish with this. We'll finish with something like that, like a cone grab.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like we go through the boring stuff first, and then they get at the end, get through it. We do all our plyometrics and jumps and all those things, and then like this is how we that's how we finish the day.
Cool.
You know what I mean? So it's like a little part of the end. With the younger kids, that could be a big chunk because that's like just one of the games we're going to put into a session, and the kids really love it so much that we'll end up playing it for 15, 20 minutes. You know what I mean? Whereas like the younger kids, we might do it for 5 at the end or whatever. So, any activity like that, like we were talking about, that really drives the intent and like gets kids excited about, especially in a group setting too, right? Like everyone's involved, right?
Yeah.
It's just not one kid alone running on a treadmill, right? Everyone's activated, everyone's excited, everyone's laughing, goofing around. So that's another part of it. The environment, just like the social environment, like really kind of ups the ante a little bit as well. So the cone grab's great. We also do it with like a pool noodle, where like, you got a group of kids laying on the ground on their belly, and then you got like 5 yards behind, you got their partner standing up with a noodle. You'll say go, and the guys on the ground got to do a get up sprint, and the people from behind, they kind of gain a little ground because they're already standing up, and you try to reach out and tag them with the pool noodle. So that's a great activity. You've seen like the LED rabbit that we have, like the light, like that thing's awesome because the kids, I mean, just anything lights, right? Kids go crazy for it.
Yeah, tell me about that. Tell me about that a little bit, because I don't think everyone listening has probably seen the LED rabbit. I was looking at getting one. It looks so cool. But tell me about how that works real quick, because I think that could work for kids and even older too, in a lot of ways. I've seen it for swim
it's funny.
Too.
It's set up for, it's 100% set up for like, high level, like adult style training. You know what I mean? It's, shuttle drills and, track and field stuff. And it's, when you get the little computer program that it comes with, it's definitely set up like that. But, for me, I just set it up where you can set different distance on the LED light. Basically, it's the light turns on and gives you like 3 seconds to get ready, and then it beeps and it takes off, and you can set the speed.
Yeah. It's like on a rope, and it travels.
It's on a rope, on the ground, and you can just see the light kind of moving. So you can set the speed at whatever you want, and then you can set it like random, where it like goes up 5 yards, comes back 5, 10, or you can just go like, all right, we're gonna run 20 yards down and back, or you can just do a straight sprint, where the kids, like, sometimes we just do a straight sprint, and the kids try to beat the light by running into the crash mat at the end. I mean, there's a lot of application to it. But we keep it pretty simple. But, the kids what I love about it is you can manipulate the speed to each kid. It just takes a second. You just hit the button, and, so if I got a kid that runs like who flies, all right, I'm going to crank this up, make it a little faster. I'm going to make this kid work, because one of the things is like, those kids that are super talented, they need to be challenged, or unless they get bored. You know what I mean? And then the other side of it is kids that are maybe slower they're kind of shy, and they don't want to lose because they know they're slower than every other kid. So what's nice about this thing is like, I can crank it up for a fast kid and slow it down for a slower kid, and they're still getting that. They're still getting that intent. They're still working hard because they're going to just race their speed. You know what I mean? So that's a pretty neat thing with the LED rabbit.
Yeah.
Some of the other ones we do, which are fun, is like similar to the athlete laying on the ground. We'll do a hill sprint. So we put the athletes, one athlete up on the hill about halfway up, but he's like laying down or sitting or facing the person at the bottom, and you'll say go, and they chase each other up and they try to run each other down. But then obviously hill sprint makes it a little bit harder. So you got to, and I love the hill too, is because technique wise, like, I feel like it cleans it, like one of those activities that just naturally cleans everything up.
Yeah.
You see kids really dig with their arms and drive and pushing into the ground really hard. So that's a big one for me as well. I'm trying to think of some of the other, especially the linear speed ones. I mean, even just a silly like relay race.
Yeah.
Especially like the way I like to do it is you have, instead of having a kid run down and back, you have the teams you have teams at each, like you have kids at each end. So you're just running one straight sprint. Like, say you're doing a relay, but with the way we do it a lot is like, they have to carry something. You're going to carry like a 20-pound med ball, or you have to drag like a tackling dummy with you behind you.
Oh, yeah.
Anything that like sort of messes them up and makes them run differently. Right.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing too. We were talking about technique. I think the more things you can add to a sprint, like say, for example, to sprinting, the different ways you can like manipulate how they run by the environment, by making them carry things or hold something overhead. Like you see those drills where they hold a sandbag or water bag over their head. Like those are all like you're just slightly playing with like these nuances of how they move, right? And it gives them more, probably expands their bandwidth of ability to run, right? So I love doing that stuff. because it forces the kids to do it differently. You know what I mean? And secretly I'll be like, we got a kid who flies, so I'll give him like the 30-pound ball, and we got a kid who's not that fast. So I'll give him I'll give him like the 8-pound ball, right? And then all of a sudden things are like evens the test, and so it's like the race is close, and now everyone's really going. So I do quite a bit of stuff like that with the younger kids, but it's amazing too, Joel. Like my son's group, he's in 6th grade, so it's like 11, 12-year-olds. You wouldn't believe just how pumped they get for like, hey, line up today. We're timing your sprints. Yeah. Like we're just going to run 20 yards and I want to time them. And we're going to do 6 or 7 of them. And you're going to try to break your time, and like, I want you to write them down. And next time we come, we're going to try to beat it. You know what I mean? So the kids all have like their own record board on one of the dry erase boards. And it's all simple stuff. Literally. It's like 20-yard sprint, broad jump, vertical jump, like all your simple stuff, but they get totally pumped to try to break those records all the time. So I posted the other day a video, and like it was one of the best days we ever had. It's funny because like social media didn't like really love it because it's like kind of just basic stuff. Like it wasn't my normal stuff where I show kids doing flips and jumping off things and all the different gymnastics activities we do. It was just really like we worked like technique with the bar. With all the kids have an empty bar, and we're working like cleans, but we're working like I'm trying to get the kids to get under the bar like from an early age. So because there's too many kids older when they do cleans, where they jump their feet out wide, or they're scared to get into a squat. So I started like teaching the kids with a really light bar right from the get-go to get under the bar into like a deep front squat. And believe it or not, it's actually been working really good. Like the kids are getting really good at like just popping under the bar. So if they don't know if that's the only way they've ever been taught, they're not going to know any different. Like they'll just, as they get older and get stronger, they're going to drop under the bar every time they clean it. They're never going to catch high. You know what I mean? And so we've been working that, and we just took 10 minutes, clean technique, working on getting under the bar. And then the rest of the time we played some flag football, a little bit of a game. Then we did like this little wrestling thing where they have to like, it's almost like knee football, where they have to like get to one end or the other without getting like wrestled to the ground by their buddy. We did the technique with the cleans. We did time sprints, and we did measured broad jumps. And it was like one of the best sessions we've ever had with the kids, because it was just simple, straightforward, and all the kids were excited to do those activities. So I think like 11 and 12, sorry, I'm kind of getting off here, but like I think 11 and 12 is like that transition age is a lot of fun to train. Yeah. Because we're still doing like, they still have the kid brain where like they still get excited about playing games and things like that. But they're also old enough now that I'm starting to teach technique of things, like especially lifting, right? Yeah. Which is very important for them to learn going forward. And because I think like when they get to that age where they really embrace it, they're going to have all those pieces in place, and it's going to be easy to do for them and easy to coach. Yeah.
It reminds me of, I think it was the Polish weightlifting system I had heard. Until age 14, it was the Olympic lifting then was like the weight was fixed. Like it couldn't exceed like your body weight or 3/4 of your body weight, but you got judged for how good you were at it. And then after that, you could put weight on, which I think is an awesome idea. But yeah, I saw those kids like just dropping under empty bars, and I was like, just the ability to drop under and absorb, even though not a lot. It's not far off of just doing that as a plyometric, like squat, just dropping down and just repeated squat hops. It's just, which is a great skill as well,
And it's ugly at first.
Oh yeah.
But like I don't care, like, because like they're not going to get, one, they're not going to get hurt, and two, we have so much time to develop it. So much time. Like these kids have been coming basically since September, the beginning of football. They've been coming straight through twice a week. You know what I mean? So it's like, and we have all spring and all summer, and if they come, or we have all next year, like we just have forever, like so much time to develop those things. So that's why I'm always like telling people, especially on social media, like you got so much time with these kids to get into like the higher level stuff. Yeah. You don't have to have them like becoming a great lifter when they're 8 or 9 or 10. Like they don't need that right now. Yes, I understand that you're a weightlifter and your family does it. Mm-hmm. Great. But the majority of kids don't. right? And they don't need to be forced to do those things. There's so many other ways to get stronger, and probably it's more beneficial doing it like the natural way, like, gymnastics, body weight
Yeah.
exercises, and gymnastics, and calisthenics,
Yep.
and just learning how to like climb and crawl and you know, those things in place first before you start to tackle like the other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it highlights a bit of the fragmented nature of how we look at human performance. Like, I've seen videos of, and it's funny because everyone thinks these videos are awesome, but it's like a strength coach with a bunch of high schoolers and they're just learning the squat and he's going over like 2 minutes of where to put this limb and this foot and that foot. And people love that. Like, oh, he's coaching them up. And I'm
Yeah,
thinking to myself, wouldn't it be better for these kids if, well, one, they went through like what you're doing where they're exposed to it, but it's just gradual over time and they can self-organize and it's light enough that it's going to give them those options. But what if they just did a bunch of different squats? What if they did sandbag squats and goblet squats and split squats and all the different ways? And
yep,
eventually they're going to figure out something that works for them too, because that's the thing is I think a lot of people don't understand as well, different alignments and different ways the body is compressed. Not everyone's going to squat exactly with your feet exactly like this and sit back exactly
sure,
like this. There's different ways to fill and expand the spaces within the body too. So allowing chances to self-organize with some different just ways to squat is going to make you stronger and you're going to squat more how your body's meant to squat. And you're going to be more robust with it. So I do think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning though. Like I think for some reason, there's a gap in understanding that there's this optimal level of exploration where the athlete gets to choose and experiences some different ways to do things, and then that will lead to the higher peak. But yet, for some reason, I think that's just the biggest. I think it's just a knowledge gap. We're just so
right,
used to, this drill perfect technique type system, and I know the research is coming out in a substantial amount that the constraints-led approach is better. It's going to yield superior results over time, and yet I don't know. It's like I think I've heard it takes like 30 years for this stuff to fully immerse, in
oh
a
yeah, for
culture. So
sure,
it's
for
just
sure. And
crazy.
we've talked
Yeah.
about it before too. It's right now too, it's very wordy stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Big
So
words, big motor learning
yeah,
words. Yeah.
you know
It's
what I
tough.
mean? So it turns off. I think at first it turned me off. You know
Yep.
what I mean? And then I you kind of dig through it for a while and you can
Hmm.
find what you're looking for. But yeah, I think so. I think that's one of the reasons too is that there's so much basic strength and conditioning information out there now, right? Because it's like the industry is getting a little bit older, right? But now this like constraints led type stuff that's very new and it's very sciencey and very wordy. So like there's a lot of coaches that probably haven't absorbed it yet. You know what I mean? And there's probably a lot of coaches that haven't had to work with like a certain age group that
Yeah.
like where you have to kind of force to do it that way. You know what I mean? Because I think if you are forced to work with that age group, you um, very quickly figure out what works and doesn't. You know what I mean? Because you go crazy, like
Oh, yeah.
a bunch of 10-year-old, like you started coaching with coaching your kid's soccer team. Like you learn quick, like what the kids like and what the kids dislike, and how to run a practice and make it all go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's same thing like coaching football. Like we want to teach the kids how to tackle correctly, right? And so like I'm a big believer in like Andy Ryland, like
Hmm.
in the USA Football and like what the way they do it. But like so when I have my youngest kids, like we do a bunch of activities that are just sort of rough and tumble and like wrestling and grappling
Hmm.
before we ever get into like
Oh, yeah.
teaching them like tackle technique. You know what I mean? So like we get them pushing and pulling, we get them like hanging on to a kid, like almost like you already tackled a kid, like you got your shoulder into them, and they just have to try to hold on, and while the other kid tries to get away. Like we do all these different activities to sort of slowly like build this framework and movement, all these different movements, and get them used to like contact before we actually do the contact. You know what I mean? And then the other side of it is like what that does is it gets kids that are like sort of like tackle averse.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Like you get kids that
Yeah.
want to come out for football, they don't want to tackle, right?
Hmm.
It's like, why are you playing?
Hmm.
But they're just nervous and they're scared. And once you get them more like, more comfortable in someone else's personal space or someone in your personal space, they start to figure it out and they become pretty decent at it. You know what I mean? So it's like it's so opposite of like this highly
Hmm.
rigid structured like one way. This is how you teach. This is how you teach tackling. We throw a bunch of different things at them with the idea that they're going to learn all these like different skills that they can put towards like the one thing later.
Yeah. I like those stepping stone skills too. I've been thinking about that a lot more deeply with high jump and like the arch backwards over the bar where you have to do basically like a back bend in the air. And some kids there's a lot of fear in that. It's not, a lot of people will sit at the high jump area and say, oh, well, arch your back more. They'll just say it. And the kid can't do it because there's too much fear. They just don't have the capacities.
But like you could take that kid, like you want a kid to be like that arch, like high jumper, like put him like his back towards the mat and throw a ball over their head and they're going to jump back and catch the ball and they're going to arch their back. You know what I mean? Like those are the things I think about. Like you can get, if you have if you do it right, that's the other thing too. If you do it early enough, right? Like if you get a kid exposed to high jump at age 8, 9, or 10, you can like do all these silly little drills that like give them the stepping stones to more advanced technique later on. You know what I mean? So that's the problem. I think here is that kids probably aren't exposed to high jump early enough. Like the first time they do it is probably 7th grade, right? Like when you first can come out for the track team. Like imagine if you get to do high jump when you're like 4th grade and it was just like, hey, go high jump.
Yeah.
Like don't even show them how to do it. Like, because they're going to go home and look on YouTube anyways.
Yeah.
Right? Don't even show them, like, just like, hey, see that bar? I want you guys to jump over it. They'll come up with 100 different ways to jump over it.
Yeah. Yeah. My kids, it is funny. Yeah. I'll, at the end of practice, I'll let them, they'll watch like in the indoors when they don't have school, they'll come to practice and watch. And then watching them try to do their renditions of high jump is pretty fun at the end. But they like just going on the pits and trying to do flips on the pits. And honestly, if that's going to prepare, what's going to prepare 100%. You to do that later is that kind of thing, And so,
yeah.
I
mean, that's why we have a trampoline at our house.
Yes.
Like literally, you know what I mean? It's so funny because we were in the state. It was a state semifinal this year for football, and there was 2 different plays in the game. Like my older son caught a ball, like jumped up over a kid and like pulled it down and scored. And my other son later in the game like was sort of like running with a kid. The kid was covering him, and the ball went up, and they like sort of like both caught it in the air and like tussled over it, and like he came down and with the ball and scored, right? And I was thinking to myself, I was like, we spent hours and hours. I used to sit on the deck and the 2 boys would be in the trampoline and I'd throw the football up and they would jump up and try to like catch it and fight for it. I mean, I'm not like, my wife would be like, take them outside. They're driving me crazy. And like, it would be wintertime and we would be outside and we would do that game. And then it like eventually got to the point where like all 4 kids were in there. Even the little ones were in there. You know what I mean? And like I would try to throw it in a space where like they had to jump for it and get it, and they would like wrestle for it. And I like when that happened, when those plays happened, that's all I could think about was like that freaking hours and hours we spent out in that trampoline. And we've been through 3 of them. I got 4 kids. We've been through 3 trampolines, just destroyed them because we used to spend so much time. And then my younger one, like I just remember like actually my daughter too, when she was doing gymnastics, like they would just go out there and just spend 10 to 15 minutes just doing all kinds of flips and gainers and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's nothing I taught them. They came up with them themselves. Whether they like saw someone else do it or they're just exploring and moving around. You know what I mean? So yeah, like I just, that's why it, like when it comes to the training, like the youth training that I have down here, we just try to do as much stuff as we can, like fit as much activity as we can in the most dynamic way we can, at the earliest ages possible.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So they get exposed, because I don't think most kids get that on a daily basis.
Yeah, no, it makes me think about, I think along with the constraints, I agree. I was going to say too, I agree with the motor learning, back to what you said, because the words like differential learning. Okay, well, what is that? Well, it's repetition without repetition. Well, what's that? And but I like, I think it was Hunter Eisenhower he had posted it and called it every rep different. I'm like, oh yeah, if I was trying to explain this to high schoolers, that makes sense. Do a squat and every rep's different. Do a pull up and every rep's different. Like that.
Right.
It's just, I think there just needs to be a translation that's just extremely simple terminology to the point where you just tell an athlete this thing, and
Yeah.
they automatically know what it is, and then it's just, and then you get to work with it, versus I don't know why it's so academic.
It's like too, the way I look at it too, it's like adding layers. Like you
yeah,
add layers, right? Like you do one activity, oh, they got it, right? So
yeah,
let's do something either a little bit different than the activity that we just did, or add another piece
yeah,
to that activity. Like here's a simple example. Like we'll do, like, I'll set up the hurdles, right? And the kids will do hurdle jumps. Great. They all looked fine
yeah.
doing those hurdle jumps. So the next time through, like literally the next set, we're going to do lateral hurdle jumps.
Mm-hmm.
And then literally the next set, we're going to do 180 lateral hurdle jumps. Like you can change the slightly, just tweak the movement just a little bit, and get this, you're still doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But now you just slightly landed differently. You're taking off differently. So you're just providing more, more activity, bigger bandwidth, more, kind of, I don't know. I just think that's kind of how you do kind of develop those athletic abilities, by always like slightly just tweaking it, because nothing's ever the same in sport, right? Everything's always different. Everything's chaotic and changing.
Yeah.
So
Well, even I think in sort of fixed sports, like the distance running is a good example. Like that informal, like there's informal and formal, and I think we're so lopsided with everything is formal, everything is written to a T. And I think the reason people would say, well, don't train that way all the time, is because sport is chaotic. Well, that's totally true. But I think it's more than just being adaptable in sport. It's also, I just don't think the body adapts well for anything if you do, like Randy Huntington had said with just sprint training, if you do the same exact sprint more than, I think he said 3 times in a row, he's like, once you get to 4, you're really pushing on the nervous system, even 3. And even like music, it's like no one plays the same note more than a couple times in a row, really, and then you do a different note. There's always, or even the way scales work, there's a lot of inherent variation, and the brain likes that kind of thing. And so I think about like Nick Willis he has one of the most prolific milers in track, like, ever. I think he broke 4 minutes from age 19 all the way to 39 every single year, which is absolutely insane. And he had wrote, and this was such an underrated like post. I mean, there was like probably several hundred or 1,000 people that liked it and a lot of comments, but this to me was like, this should be ubiquitous. It should be universal. And he said part of the reason for his success was every year after indoor or something, there was some point in the year where for 6 weeks or some extended period of time, he wouldn't do fixed workouts. He wouldn't do whatever the constrained thing was. He would just go run hills kind of randomly and just enjoy it. And then he'd go jump in with the sprinters and run some fast 400s or something. Like, it was a very off the cuff thing. And, so it's a give and take, though. If you train like that all year, you don't have enough constraints to funnel you into the specific needs of your event. But if you train too specifically all year, it gets boring and monotonous, and you lose that kind of human, like you're saying, like you watch a cool movie in the 80s and you're inspired to go outside and train, like just man in nature running hills, like,
sure.
like just do that, and then it's kind of like I like to call it following the thread. One of the questions I had for you was creativity in coaching. And I think that fits a little bit even with like the movies in the 80s and the music in that time. And because it's like you find, I was watching, there's I might have even talked to Chris Corfus about this because Chris is into music, but like this this YouTube personalized name is Rick Beto, and he was a music producer, and he talked about the lack of creativity. He's like, just start playing guitar and just start messing around with notes, and then follow the thread. This sounds cool. All right, I'm going to try this. Okay, this sounds cool. I'm going to try this. And I think, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Have you ever seen that Dave Grohl quote? The Dave Grohl quote about Nirvana? And it was just basically like, oh, you got kids now like getting lessons and things like that. And we were just a bunch of dudes in a garage just jamming away. We became the greatest band in the world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's, he hits the nail on the head there.
Yeah.
Because they just started playing. They probably sucked.
I'm sure they all
you
those
know what I mean?
Of that era did. I'm sure, but then that was Prince too, because I've been studying like a lot of, I just like studying talent, like talented musicians or actors. Like how did they come up? How did they become who they were? And like Prince is like Minneapolis, there's like all these Battle of the Bands competitions in the neighborhood, just very informal to my knowledge. And, but there's nothing like that today, I don't think. Like it's And so it's interesting to take a zoom out and look at how everything's different. And then how has this worked its way into sport? And then how can we make sport and training something that can take on some of those things that some of those, brilliant minds, creative minds had earlier? And sometimes you wonder, I do wonder how, society shapes everything, and can sport and play be almost an escape? You don't want to be overly conservative and be like, oh, it's all about only the good old days, right? Like we can mix like like the LED rabbit, like you have like technology and there's really cool integrations. But yeah, just to be able to follow those threads of the informal. I think we don't spend enough time just doing that. And I think a lot of it comes from playing with your own kids too. Like to me, that's the biggest one. I do levels. Like,
Yep.
my son's going to be do flag football this year. So he wants to play. So we take his football. I'm like, all right, level 1, do this catch. And it's like, just jump off the couch and catch it. All right, level 2, spin in the air and catch it and land. And level 3, land on one foot. And, it's just like, and I'm just coming up with what the next hardest thing to do is.
100%.
And he
100%.
loves it. He always wants to do that kind of thing. Absolutely loves it.
We used to do this fun. It's so fun. I was actually talking to the kids about it the other day. I called it overspeed. Like they don't know what the hell overspeed means, but I would literally like take 2 kids and we would hold hands and I would start sprinting with them and I would run a little bit faster than their capacity. Right. And they're like, legs are flying. They're trying to keep up, and like, and it would, they have this, like, they would get this feeling of like being able to move faster than they ever have, and there's like, that's kind of like for them, like they're on the verge of like being out of control, which kids love that feeling. You know what I mean? And I called it overspeed. And we would like, it was great for me because I'd get some like extra running in and we just run like the length of the yard fence, like, you know what I mean? And I just love that idea of like being able to like just come up with stuff just on the fly. I mean, half the stuff we do even in the gym now, like when you see some of my videos, it was just like, oh, let's try this. Or like, a kid will do something. I'm like, dude, that's a great idea. Like, let's go with that. Let's keep trying. Let's keep trying those things. There was one day my son set up, I didn't know what he was doing. He was probably 7 or 8 years old. And he was like setting up this, like on the crash mat, he had this set up this platform. And all of a sudden, like he goes running up and he like attempted to do like a gainer.
Nice.
And like, he must've seen a video or something. Cause I certainly can't do a gainer, but he just like, sort of moved his body a certain way and was like, oh, all right. And then he did it again. And like every time he did it, he'd try to twist a different way. And like before you know it, he's friggin' doing a gainer. You know what I mean? And it's like that exploratory type stuff, I think is where the, where the real athletic development happens in childhood and what they need more of rather than this rigid structured stuff.
Yeah. I think that even works all the way up to like more advanced plyos too. If you just had, like you said, you have the hurdles, like if you just have like hurdles, like collapsible hurdles that can go different heights and like boxes, like even like 12-inch plyo boxes, or if you're a track coach, you might have some 4-inch boxes and 6-inch boxes. You can do so much with that. It doesn't have to be, okay, we're going to do 4 sets of 6 hurdle hops and they're all the same. I mean, you could have the hurdles being different distances and heights and start there, and you could see how kids respond to that, or different boundings with different box distances, and you can mess with the box distances and challenge kids in different ways. And I find that those types of, even with older athletes, I find I've always had such a positive response with that in preparing them or funneling them into a maximal effort on the day. And I do think a shade of that always still exists. Like, you were saying, even with a high school, there's still games that can make this more community, that can give this more life. It can be a richer experience. And so I think my own person, I'm so exploratory sometimes. I sometimes have to rein in my own desire for or sometimes some practices I'm like, okay, Joel, this is going to be a very basic practice. Don't get carried away. But sometimes I'm like, yeah, let's have some fun this practice. The kids need to reset their systems a little bit. Let's do more games. Let's do more exploration and that kind of thing. So I think it can go all the way up into mainline training too. And I think the more we train youth and kind of follow that thread, I think it can give us ideas for that kid that's still there, that still likes that kind of thing later on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I told you this before, but my oldest son is, like I said, he's he loves the gym. He'll train for 2 hours. My second son wants to know, give me the 2 exercises that are going to give me the most benefit. and I'm going to come train those 2 things, and then I'm going home, right? But like, he's a gamer. Like, if I said, hey, you want to go to the field, you want to go play pickup hoops, you want to go, you know what I mean? Like, he loves the game. He loves the game stuff, whereas the older one like loves the preparation stuff.
Interesting.
You know what I mean? So everyone's different. You know what I mean? That what makes them tick. So like, you'll see them down here, and one of them's doing all, he's here forever, and the other one comes in and is like, he's going to do 8 sets of 3 weighted chin up, and he's going to do 8 sets of 3 front squat, right? Let's just, for example, and he gets his 24 reps in, and he's going home. And the other one's like, I'm doing cleans today, and I'm going to squat, and then I'm going to do, it's like endless. I'm like, dude, time to go home. It's time for dinner, so it's like, every athlete's a little bit different. And so you got to just kind of find what works for them,
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I'd include this. I wrote this email, yesterday or today, maybe I sent it out, but I think sometimes in physical preparation, we don't look at, I think if we look at so much at just only what transfers, it's kind of like that. There's the informal and the formal, there's the exploring. If it's only, well, this transfers, this is part of this machine in this way, shape, and form, we lose some of the human side in the sense that there's just a cool thing about just getting a pump and seeing your muscles grow. That's something that's human, that's actually separate from sport. I don't think when you do that, when you're just getting a pump and feeling good, you're not thinking, oh man, I'm going to be able to push people so hard in the football. No, it just felt good. Or when you're running and the timer's set up and, hey, we're running 20s today. I just want to beat I'm not thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to beat this guy in the field because I'm running it. No, you just had fun because you're running faster, and this is part of being a human, And so I think, I do think that's also part of it. And that's something that I think, especially I think sometimes people can have different opinions on the weight room. And I think it just depends on the kids sometimes. I think some kids just really love that feeling and seeing of transformation, and I think that's a big thing. I think strength and conditioning as a industry is also, it's the transformation industry at a fundamental root, even almost before
100%.
The transfer piece. And especially in the 1980s spirit of it, lest we get almost too mechanical with the whole situation.
Yep, for sure. I mean, I think it gives a lot of kids a lot of just positive, you feel good, look good. Yeah, we always just say, look good, feel good, play good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So even if it doesn't naturally, carry over. So yeah, it's like one of them really likes that stuff. He's down here before games lifting. The other one can just show up and turn it on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like, that's what he's actually thinking about. It's not that he's lazy.
Yeah.
All he's thinking about is getting on the court and playing.
Yeah.
Whereas the other one needs like a little bit of stimulation before to make sure that he's in the right mindset to play. So, that's the difference. He'll take like, a bunch of different shots before the game, and the other one's just sort of loose and let's get this started.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting
to see.
I think a lot of people who are very in very deep in physical preparation or strength and conditioning can look down on like your other son, right? Who his thing that's fulfilling is the game. It's the play. It's that everything that goes with that. And so I think it takes some wisdom to be like, okay, this lights your fire. Let's dig into this. This lights your fire. Here's all the ways we can dig into this thing. And then the one thing that maybe that goes with that a little bit, but I wanted to ask you this, and then I have a little lightning round, is rhythm development. And I mentioned this too. I like this video of like Baker Mayfield, that's like dancing back when he was at Oklahoma. He's so like fluid and just relaxed, and you can see how that fits into how he plays. And I think that's a piece that we just don't, talk about that much. But I think it's, and that's, I think, is almost another thing that's, if you, those things that are just innately fun in and of themselves and fulfilling, there's training your body physically, there's games and play, and there's also like that dance kind of rhythm piece that can be fun to itself. And not everyone's going to love it the same way for sure. But I'm curious, with kids and even up till whenever it falls off a little bit, but development of rhythm. And I'll just precede this with just saying, I do find it very interesting in coaching track and high school track, and a lot of athletes who didn't do a lot of other sports, or this is the only sport they do. And some of them actually do have dance backgrounds, but I do a lot of rhythmic sprint drills, not for hey, this transfers because your knee's here. It's more just, can you coordinate your body with rhythm? And then warming up with rhythm, I like what it does to the body, like the brain, body, and mind, and kind of the intention piece. So we'll do some
Sure,
different,
because
yeah,
well, and I think too, it's still one of those things where like the more, how do I explain it? Like when you do those drills, right? You're taking your joints, your arms and legs through unique ranges of motion, right? Like a little bit different than a sprint. Okay. And so you do different drills. Now you're exposing those athletes to a variety of different things, like multiple activities, right? And then the more you can coordinate and sync your body to do those efficiently, in my mind, is going to make you a better athlete, right? So like the more rhythmic you can get, and like not just being rhythmic in an A skip, but also a B skip,
yeah,
C skip, backward skip,
yeah,
side skip, hop, right, left, like all those things, right?
yeah,
The better rhythmic you can be during all those things, now I mean, in my mind, you're like a better athlete. You're
yeah,
like, you have more skill across a wide range of things. So that's like when you just said that, that's the way I think of it. Within a very structured program like a track practice, right? You're now have some variability and so unstructured type stuff because you're gonna challenge these athletes by doing a whole bunch of different movements. You know
yeah,
what I mean? So that's one way I look at rhythm, being able to move like smoothly and systematically and like with good synchronization and stuff through a variety of different movements and activities. But also, I was saying another way I look at rhythm is like being able to change rhythm,
mm,
go from like one movement seamlessly to the next movement and maybe back, right? So like Brian Grosso taught me this one. It was like he set up some hurdles and then it was open space and then some more hurdles and open space. So you'd like sidestep over the hurdles and then you'd go into a skip and you'd sidestep over to the next set of hurdles and then to a skip. So you're able to seamlessly transition from different movements.
mm,
So I like that idea. I
that's
like the
cool.
whole like being able to transition between different activities without any like real issue. Like as you see it, like I have kids come in and be like, all right, I want you to do this and this, and there's like a second where they have to stop and kind of figure out what they're doing. So if you can get better at like transitioning through different movements, so you can like we do that a lot in warm ups. We'll do like backward skip and I'll say switch, and immediately want to see them go into a forward skip, and I'll say switch, and maybe they'll go to a side step, and I'll say switch, and then we'll go into like a back pedal, right? So you're just seamlessly transitioning. So that's like one way you can do. You can add a piece of that into your warm ups with your athletes. You know what I mean? And you see it happen, I think, in sport, like football, a guy's running and he's got the ball, and then a guy, like, say he jumps over someone or a guy falls on the ground, he has to like adjust his
Yeah,
body to like what's happening. And then he jumps over the guy, his foot hits the ground, then you have to like kind of reacclimate yourself to running again, right? So there's like that transition from one movement to another, and then or you see like a guy like where do you like I one of our athletes actually told me one day she because we practiced rolling so much, she was playing field hockey and she got tripped, and instead of like she was about to fall on her face, and then she realized like she tucked her head and shoulder and rolled out of it and got back up and continued to sprint.
mm.
So she went from like running, tripping, rolling back to sprinting seamlessly,
That's
right?
awesome.
And so there's like like I like that rhythm is like that, the ability to change and go back to what you were doing, like seamlessly. So that's kind of another way I look at rhythm as well. And like you were saying, now a lot of people don't like it, like especially like guys like, oh, I'm tough, like I can't
Yeah,
dance, like but like rhythm and dance and those type of activities were huge if you read
yeah,
like all the old PE books.
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
all my old PE books have a section on dancing. You know what I mean? Now, how much do they do it in phys ed classes today? Probably not that much, but I think it's definitely worthwhile or even learn an instrument, right?
yeah,
Like I think I got lucky. Like my brother sort of taught me how to play drums when I was younger, and just
yeah.
to learn
Oh,
how to
that's awesome.
keep a beat. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? I wasn't like Neil Peart or anything, but like I could keep a rhythm in different types of different notes. I could play along with a song and things like that. So I think those things can greatly help an athlete's rhythm, or just have that ability to keep time. You know.
Yeah, that's so cool with
So
the drums. I had written an email a long time ago that highlighting Caleb Dressel, one of the most prolific, if not the most prolific NCAA swimmer of all time. I mean, his sprint records were just insane and a magnitude so much faster than the other sprint times in history that it'd be like someone coming along and running like 9.93 in the 100 or something, like crushing insane. But it was so dominating of a performance. And he was a drummer, like grew up playing drums. And he also had like the highest frequency. Like people were trying to understand why his stroke rate was so high. And so, I mean, obviously it wasn't all, I'm sure, the drums. There were so many other factors, but you can't help but think like if there's this fast rhythm he could attune to and just built outward from that. I wonder if that, played a role. But then also, yeah, like you said, like I find that athletes who have the better rhythms in the sprint drills, and I love that informal, like it could be different music every time too. Can you do this drill to this music? Can you do it to this music or this frequency? And athletes who are better at those rhythms of those drills tend to be better full approach high jumpers. They can handle the rhythm of the start, the curve, the transition. Whereas the athletes who aren't good as it tend to be a little better off a 3-step type situation where there's not as much of that demand. And so I see it there too. I think it's it's something I really appreciate and have grown to appreciate more over time.
I was saying like we were talking before the show, when my kids were little, we had the Xbox. And we had that game Just Dance, and they used to have this like little like thing with Xbox where like it would scan your body, so it would pick up like if there was 4 kids standing there, and then you'd play Just Dance, and the song would play, and it would point at different ways to move your body, and the kids would do it, and it would give you points and how well you did it. You know what I mean? And I mean, we was in a winter time or like in our down in the basement where the kids would play. We would play that game all the time. It was awesome, and I feel like it was, they'd be like literally sweating when they got done. So it was like, there was a lot of movement going on. It was funny. My oldest one was like, he would get mad at the other ones, and like as soon as like he noticed someone was like beating him, he just turned and like deck one of them and like knock him over. You know what I mean? It's like classic big brother.
Yeah. Well, you're bringing the masculine into the Just Dance. You're still getting some wrestling and fighting in there.
Yeah. So it was, those are the days. They're older now, but I tell you, I miss like all that stuff we did. I was just always in the back of my mind, like I probably shouldn't be like that, but like it was always like this activity we're doing, this will probably help them when they get older. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's one big experiment, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Lightning round, Jeremy. I just finished out 3 quick ones here. I preluded this. I think I mentioned before we hit record, but if you had to list your favorite 80s training movie down to maybe 1 or 2 that had the biggest impact on you, which one would that be? Or maybe a couple?
Yeah. So I would definitely put in, there was a movie called American Flyers. Kevin Costner was in it, and him and his like brother were like elite cyclists, and they raced in this thing called like the Hell of the West. It was like, it was like the Tour de France of the United States. And oh man, I watched that movie so many times. I actually like my brother bought like a 10-speed, and like I used to take that thing on rides like forever. I would go out and like find a hill and like I'm gonna conquer this mountain. Of course I get like, first of all, right, I'm probably like, way more fast twitch than I am endurance. Like I played football, ran track, right? So like just naturally. And so here I am like going on these like endurance rides on my bike. And I used to wonder like I was so freaking tired. I was like, yeah, you later on think I'm like, it probably weren't really made for those type of things. So that one. And then the other one was Vision Quest.
Oh yeah.
The wrestling movie was, even though I wasn't a wrestler, like you could just like, he like starved himself to get down to like a certain weight, and like, he'd be waiting at the elevator and just knock off like push-ups, and that scene where he like does the pegboard, like he climbs up the pegboard, and there was actually one of those at the gym, like at the community gym that we had when I was a kid, and like I would try to do that stupid thing all the time. And that the scene where the kid's walking up and down the bleachers with like a log on his back.
Yeah.
I remember being
that's iconic. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember I was even thinking like I might have even been in college and I was like walking up and down bleachers with like with like a 45-pound bar and plates on there. I mean, I was that old. It wasn't like I was little.
Yeah.
I was like I was like 19 or 20 trying to emulate those type of things. So yeah, those are my go-to for 80s movies. Those you know, and I can still watch those today and get excited about them.
Yeah, my kids will definitely be watching those at some point, without question. All right, favorite music to train to. So if you're working out, what do you like listening to?
Oh God, so I'm like a big punk rock, like pop punk
Mm-hmm.
type guy. I used to, like I told you, I played drums and like
Oh yeah,
growing up.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So like um there was this genre of music called ska core
Oh
that
yeah,
came out. It's like ska with hardcore. So there was
okay.
bands like the Mighty
Oh yeah.
Bosstones, who I saw 1,000 times when I was a kid. A band called Operation Ivy, who was a big Rancid. I
Mm-hmm.
was a big fan of. Even like Green Day, Newfound
Mm-hmm.
Glory, like that genre of music. I really love because that's what I like listened to growing up. You know what I mean? So that's pretty much what I listen to. I have like the pop punk station on my Amazon Music. I just throw that on and go. Everyone you know thinks doesn't not everyone loves it,
Ah,
but
yeah.
I do.
No,
And it's much better than country music, which my wife listens to, and I just want to scream.
Yeah, I'll do country. Been on an '80s country in the sauna recently
Yep.
just to go
Yep.
back, but I don't think I'd do it for workouts. But yeah, the pop punk, the fastness of that would carry you through. I could see for sure.
Yep. And lately too, I've been hitting a little a little bit of late '80s hair bands
Oh yeah,
just for fun. It's just fun to listen to some of that stuff too. Those are always good because you know all the words, right? You've
oh
heard
yeah,
them so many times you can't not sing them.
oh yeah. I didn't even grow up in the '80s, but really, I mean, I was born in '83, but like, I'd listen to Def Leppard for like station for working out and stuff.
Yep.
It's good. Like,
Yep.
I think it's
Yep.
great. All right, last one. Best your favorites, your own personal sports memory. So in your own sport or athletic career, any favorite memory?
You know what? I gotta tell. It's like it's people big like people think like this couldn't have happened, but it was literally like storybook like finish my last college game. We played in like this bowl, this ECAC bowl against Curry College, and yeah, we were down 3 touchdowns with 6 minutes left, and we came back and like we drove the field, like literally drove the field, and the last play of the game, like I caught a touchdown to win the game, like it
Oh, that's
like a
awesome.
like a movie, like
Hmm.
that you could never think. That was the last time my last play in college was I got to catch a touchdown pass to win the game. Like it literally, the thing you think about like when
Yeah,
you're little, it like literally happened. You know what I mean? So that's for me. That's like my own personal as an athlete. That was my own personal highlight
that's
for sure.
awesome. They could have made a movie about that. That's
Right?
amazing.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. Oh, hey, thank you so much, Jeremy. I know I mentioned before we started, I was like, I usually go an hour 10. I think this will be an hour 30. So I think we hit that time. And it was awesome talking to you. Absolutely love catching up. Your ideas are certainly inspirational for me. And I know a lot of people, and I've really benefited from all the ideas in your course as well with the games there. So thanks for what you do and what you're doing for the world of athletics. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode. I appreciate you being here, and I'll see you next week.